All right, thank you so much for that introduction, Kathy. And I am a member of the IARPC team that is working to put together the next 5-year plan. And so we're just going to quickly run through a little bit of background for all of you. I apologize that you guys cannot see me, but I do not have a camera associated with the computer that I'm actually allowed to use Zoom on. So my apologies that you are unable to see me. And just really quickly, what we're going to talk about, maybe for about the next 10 minutes, is just really quickly what IARPC is. I think pretty much everyone on this call already knows. What is the Arctic Research Plan, how the plan is developed, and how all of you can contribute to the process. Next slide, please, Meredith. So as I'm sure most of you all know, IARPC is a small organization within the Executive Office of the President. It's been there for almost 10 years now, when a presidential memorandum was signed designating the National Science and Technology Council to coordinate certain activities under the Arctic Research and Policy Act of 1984. This particular council is also a component of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP, which is responsible for the Arctic Executive Steering Committee. And then, as I mentioned, in 2011, IARPC became a subcommittee of this particular NSTC Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Sustainability. Next slide, please. Again, as I'm sure most of you know, that IARPC has both a federal-only and an open component. Parts of IARPC are federal-only and are responsive to the needs of the federal agencies that comprise IARPC. Other parts of IARPC are distinguished as IARPC collaborations and are open to anyone who is interested in participating. And we host a wide variety of members and encourage discussion across these boundaries in order to improve Arctic research. Much of the activity of IARPC collaborations takes place in this collaboration team format, like the one we're in today. And many of these teams host monthly open meetings around topics of interest for the community, and they help to build connections among the science community. The team structure is based upon the current Arctic Research Plan, which covers the years 2017 through 2021. And each of the teams corresponds with a research goal or chapter contained in the current plan. The teams are tasked with completing the tasks known as performance elements outlined in the research plan. It's possible that the next plan will have a very similar structure, or perhaps a slightly different structure in order to fit current research needs. Next slide, please. Right here is a graphic depicting the structure of the current 2017 through 2021 plan. It is based around 4 policy drivers, which are enhance the well-being of Arctic residents, advance stewardship of the Arctic environment, strengthen national and regional security, and improve understanding of the Arctic as a component of planet Earth. We then used those 4 overarching drivers to create 9 research goals and collaboration teams, which you see here, and then several performance elements assigned to each of those teams. Next slide, please. By law, IARPC develops and implements an Arctic research plan every 5 years with the goal of improving the collective impact of federal agency investments in Arctic research. IARPC is now beginning the development of the next 5-year plan to cover the years 2022 to 2026. And it is being drafted based on the intent and interests of the U.S. federal agencies that comprise IARPC and the work that they do. Next slide, please. Just a few basic facts for you all to consider as you have your discussion today during your meeting. The plan must align with the goals and missions of the federal agencies supporting research in the Arctic. And this is a federal document. And so the plans focus on research that can be enhanced through cooperation amongst the federal agencies. Additionally, it's important for everyone to realize that these plans do not attempt to address all aspects of Arctic research. To date, the current and previous plans have focused primarily on basic research, but they could potentially include applied research as well. And we welcome input and ideas for research having anything to do with any of the natural or social sciences. Next slide, please. I just briefly want to let you all know the timeline and the process that we intend to use to develop this next plan. And it's actually very similar to the process that we used 5 years ago in developing the current research plan. So since last fall, we have started our planning efforts by getting approval from the ARPIC principals to begin working on this next plan. We have been working really hard to develop engagement strategies and to begin outreach with all of the different stakeholders and interested parties who have a lot to contribute to this effort. One of the ways we're doing it is through collaboration team meetings like this and other IARPIC webinars, and we have other engagement planned as well. We have a small plan development steering group that meets monthly, comprised of representatives from almost all of the agencies and departments that make up IARPIC. In April, we published a Federal Register notice asking for input, and I'll get a little bit into more detail in the next slide as to what that input is, and holding different listening sessions like we are now. We will then, after we complete this first round of public input, begin drafting the team towards the end of this year and spend probably about 4 to 5 months putting that together with the goal of next spring releasing a draft plan for people to review and provide additional input. And then the ultimate goal is to release the final plan late in calendar year 2021 so that it is ready to go at the beginning of calendar year 2022. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we published a Federal Register notice in April. It is open through August 2nd to accept any comments or input that people have. And right now in this early scoping phase, the two primary issues that we are asking people to comment on have to do with the content of the plan. So what are those critical issues where federally funded science and engineering research can provide knowledge to promote good decision-making at all levels of government related to the Arctic? And we're also looking for comments relating to the organization of the plan itself. So something that you all might want to talk about in your meeting today is the current structure of goals and collaboration teams to implement those goals and performance elements. Is that the right way? Is there a new structure that might work better? And things of that nature. Next slide, please. In addition to the discussion that you all are going to have right now, there are also a lot of other ways for you to provide input and to be involved. One is to submit comments directly through the Federal Register notice mechanism. And there, when you go to the Federal Register, there's both an email address that you can use to submit comments or a way to submit comments directly on the Federal Register page. We have an online form set up on the IARPIC Collaborations site, as well as Facebook direct messaging. There are going to be other public webinars, as I mentioned, and you can find out more information about those through IARPIC Collaborations. And also, we are really looking, if anyone has strategic planning documents related to Arctic research, to please send those in to Meredith as a way to help us fully assess what should go into the next plan. And you can see the link at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. I believe this is going to be the last.
Yeah, there are a couple of extra slides that I have added for the workshop coming, or for the webinar coming on Friday. So Candace, you don't have to speak to these because I don't think you had these.
Nope, I haven't seen this slide.
Okay, so I will just say that if you're interested, we're also having a webinar on Friday that will be open to everyone, informational, and we'll kind of discuss some of these possible emerging themes and structures. Okay.
Yep, and then just lastly, also if anyone has any further questions or comments and that you think of at some point, please feel free to reach out directly to Meredith from the Secretariat. And also, we recently were fortunate enough to bring Nikush Carlo on board to serve as the plan development director, leading our small band of brothers on the plan development steering group. And so with that, I would like to turn it back over to Kathy, Danielle, and Jackie to kick off questions and discussion.
All right, well, thank you, Candace. Does anybody have any questions for Candace about the process at this point? And maybe Candace, you'll stay on, right? So if there's not a question that comes up in the chat, we can, it'll probably, once the discussion gets going, you'll be able to respond then.
Yes, I am with you guys for the hour.
Great, thanks. And then the other question I had for you, Meredith, at what time on that Friday, the session, what time will that be, Eastern time?
At 3 Eastern, and I will put the information in the chat box now.
Great. And will the presentation that you just Candace presented be put up on the, or is it up there? Maybe it's there already on our.
Yes, it's currently
there.
up on the meeting event for this page, as well as I'm sharing here in the chat.
Perfect.
The link to our, and I'm actually going to just share it on the screen so everyone knows that it's here, that you can find all of these resources on our plan development webpage. I'll make it bigger so it, where you can sign up for our newsletter that comes out monthly, get more information about IARPC, the plan. Over here, we have upcoming events that are related to plan development. All of those different ways that you can contribute that Candace outlined are right here. Although please don't send anything via mail because the NSF building is currently closed, and other relevant documents, as well as a different graphic of the timeline here that Candace outlined as well. And I will put that in the chat as, yep, okay.
Great. And as we're asking, if anybody else has a question, or you're unshared it, I'll go ahead and share my screen to set up queue up the next presentation. So.
Sounds good.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So before I start this, does anybody have any further questions, or we can bring it up at the end? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation on behalf of Danielle and Kathy and myself. This is going to be an open, we'd like to have it an informal discussion, so questions in the chat box or verbally can come across is fine. And as was Candace said, it's the developing of the 222 to 226. And what you're seeing on the upper right there is the current Arctic research plan that is available by the links if you go to both via our webpage, or it says the link for further information. So you can actually read the plan that came through a similar type process as that what we're doing now, back in a couple of years before the FY 217. So we've already seen this from Candace, why we're doing the IARPC plan, why the Arctic research plan is happening, and it's renewed every 5 years. Currently expires at the end of 2021, as Candace said. Intent is to bring together the 14 agencies to working in the Arctic, as well as the northern communities and non-federal research communities. And as all of you have known, these IARPC collaboration team webinars provides a lot of the glue of connecting both within the community as best we can, as well as between the different collaborative teams and other areas such as the International Arctic Science Committee's working group. There's a new subgroup on physical oceanography and so forth. So I would recommend that you kind of move around on that website on the collaboration team to see how things have developed and how to participate. So you've seen this already. I'm not going to spend any time on it, but just to point out, this is where we are in the marine ecosystems. It combined both the marine ecosystems in the previous plan and the Distributed Biological Observatory and some other collaborative teams into one. So focus on the marine ecosystem part of it. Candace went nicely through this, and you can get information on all the teams on that link on the lower part of that slide. I just want to make sure we all know our team leader, Kathy Kuhn, is Chief of the Environmental Sciences Management at BOEM in the Alaska office. Guillermo Odd was previously our BOEM connection, but he went on to bigger and better things, I guess, or other things. And we were very happy to have him for the period of time and work with them, and we look forward to continue working with Kathy in the same way. Danielle Dixon, Senior Program Manager at NPRB, and myself, I'm a research professor at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. So we have 3 research objectives within the Marine Ecosystem Collaborative team. One is to increase the knowledge and distribution of Arctic marine species, and these are all trophic levels at various scales, temporal and spatial, to look at the formation and maintenance, for example, of biological hotspots or causes in range shift, and we're seeing that in some of the species moving into the north, both in the Eurasian and the Amerasian sides of the Arctic. The second objective was to improve just the understanding basic life history of some of these marine species, and important, particularly in their relationship to multi-agency decision-making. And I would say that moves into from fisheries to upper trophic organisms, polar bear, walruses, any type of the marine mammals, seabirds, as well as looking at the impacts on harmful algal blooms, for example, and what that impact would have on coastal communities. And the third one is to advance the understanding of climate-related changes, biophysical interactions, and feedback. So you can see these are both related to impacts on marine resources and human communities. So these were the big 3 overarching research themes, of which the performance elements that you can see here were developed, and these were developed by input that we're doing now, but also there is a government level that goes on top of it, and then there's a group of principals from those government leads that feed into this. So I'm not going to go through all of those. You can link these on your, they're available on the agenda where we have the call in for this webinar that we have now, and you can go and read even more detail on those. But I would just point out, so we have these things called, these are the themes, 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, as I just said. And then underneath them are these performance elements. And what they are, specific questions that have been brought forward. These are the associated agencies, some that have taken the lead or cooperating on trying to address this. And then underneath it are the, this just happens to be 216, the deliverables that were listed in the Arctic Ministerial. We will also, there's another ministerial coming up this fall. There was one done in 218. So in fact, we should align these. These will be aligned on the revision to on the new 5-year plan with the most current ministerial deliverable, which would be the 2021s that come out this fall from that meeting in Tokyo, joint ministerial meeting sponsored by Iceland and Tokyo, and Japan, excuse me. And then if you go, another performance element is for the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Observing Network. It's just looking at, as one example of looking at Arctic marine species biodiversity. What are the programs monitoring the biological response to the loss of sea ice, and that these data sets need to go in an open access portal. And this really ties in nicely too with the international Circumarctic Biodiversity Monitoring Program. So we have international connections. This isn't just, this is a national US plan, but it's very important, as we know, to interface and to know and to collaborate with colleagues in other countries. And then you can see a third one is winter distribution. So when we go to 4.2, which is understanding resources and to support multi-agency decision-making. So these are the 3 performance elements that were brought forward through the plan. One of them was to look at the feeding ecology of species and the seasonal gaps, including molecular markers, and then you can see the agencies and the deliverables. The second was to look at the life history and growth rates within food webs. And the third was to look at interdisciplinary programs and synthesis efforts. And you can see the agencies that would be involved in that. The third one was to advance our understanding of biological and other component impacts, as well at different scales and relation to marine resources and the associated human communities that depend on them. So this is where the DBO, the Distributed Biological Observatories, performance elements, the 3 of them came in from their previous collaborated teams. These are the agencies, as you can see. This program continues on. We say 1 to 5. There is a 6 to 8 now in the Beaufort Sea. There are new programs starting in the Davis Strait, Baffin Bay now, and also in the Atlantic sector. So there's a build out of these time series locations. At the same time, we have meetings and regional assessments and how to build the connection. And we continue to do this to try to build local observing with coastal communities by linking to other programs. The fourth one is to look at observations of a lot, and this is very broad, looking at biology, chemistry, and physical variables. And they oftentimes are integrated, looking at feedbacks, interactions, and also to integrate with the indigenous communities. And if you go to the next one, these are the remainder of the performance elements that stand. And I put these up here because these are the ones that were brought forward through the process. They are, some of them are complete, some of them are ongoing. And how we go forward with this is why we're having this listening section. What have we missed? And these have to then, what should be expanded upon. And those are the questions when we open up the discussion period, we'd like to make sure we address. So these are the remainder 4 performance elements. You have this regional action plan in the and large marine ecosystem efforts for synthesis activities. Modeling comes in here to look at cross-disciplinary and at the system level. To continue on with the IPCC efforts on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, including developing food web models. And then to monitor, this was an added one, and I would point this out. This isn't the end all. Once these get forward and once the plan gets signed off, there's still room to add. And this one was on sound and the importance of anthropogenic and environmental sound in the Arctic and what implications that might have for ecosystem. We're talking about impacts that might by transportation and other sources of sound into the marine ecosystem. This was added halfway through this current ARP plan. So one of the things we brought forward and we just as an idea, and I would be opening this up for everybody, is how we might consider evaluate or reforming the observations and monitoring the performance elements into maybe more thematic experimental research and synthesis. This is not something this is just an idea we came up as the co-chairs, so that there would be perhaps the performance elements would fall, these and any new ones, under 3 categories. Just throwing this out: time series observations and monitoring. And this would then encompass observing such as DBO, Ambon, mooring arrays, the Chukchi Environmental Observatory, the moorings in Bering Strait. So it's just not, it's going across the disciplinary gambit, ecofoci from the NOAA field program, the fishery surveys, long-term ecological research, such as being done up in the Beaufort, fish surveys. It would fall under that type of theme and maintenance of keeping those activities moving forward. The second would be something like basic research, and we just put in there one example. This is a very broad topic. It's a performance elements in there, and this is going to be an ongoing one, looking at all these different potential observations, and then perhaps recommending indices to incorporate these monitoring programs, something more that would directly tie into your stakeholders. So this is a question for the community: is, are there performance elements now or that should go in that are more directly related to the input that resource managers and Alaska communities need for making decisions as we move forward? And then another topic could be the synthesis, and we have some performance elements that fit into that. So we just did this, brought this forward as just an example of some ideas, and we're going to be moving into the open discussion period in about a minute. And so I would ask that you put in any of your comments or be thinking about that, because the next couple of slides, I believe you've already seen, so you don't need to go spend much time on them. I would point this one out though. This is, not only do we pick performance elements for ourselves, but for the collaborative team, but we cross-link. And that's been something that's developed in this recent efforts to the team leads and the community. And Candace showed this with the broader scale with the different teams that you can see circling here. And I would just point out, we sit under the marine ecosystems here. So here's an example of how climate-related ecosystems, physical interactions. But it's not just under marine ecosystem, it connects to residents over to the sea ice. So that's a 3.1 performance element under the sea ice, but also is connecting to the human health organizations on the health and well-being. So one of the things we've been trying to do is within the 4 pillars of from global security, stewardship, and residence. And there's actually global connections to the marine ecosystems that we could, this is just one example we wanted to show you of how these teams work together to try to cross-link some of their performance elements. You've seen this already. Candace did nicely, and this is in the plan, so I'm not going to spend any time on it. You've seen this also. This is opportunities to contribute, and this information is available on the link on our MECT webpage. This was also covered, and reiterating the content of the plan, the organization, and then basically how to send and don't send, as Candace said, send an email to Roberto if need be, or fill out that form. Then we know about Nakusha on the reach out for development director for putting any input or sending emails to Meredith will work too, or contacting any one of Kathy, Danielle, or myself. So at that, I'm gonna stop my sharing. And at this point, I would open it up to any questions or comments or that folks may have, or ideas that they'd like to bring forward that should be discussed further as activities within the IARPC effort. Does somebody, okay.
This is, hi, Jackie, I see that both Katrin and Catherine Burchak had a question
Sure.
in the chat, and it said basically Katrin very much likes the concepts of these major themes, but she wonders specifically where modeling would fit in these. It seems that modeling both hindcast and forecast will become of increasing importance, and Catherine had a similar thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put my 2 cents in, and then I think maybe Danielle, you can say something too, because I know the synthesis activities with MPRB, but I think the modeling, we don't want to, it could fall under like the synthesis and modeling could be the title of that, but we want to make sure modeling actually comes all the way back into contemporary science that's being done, and also included in, it would fit into all 3 categories. And maybe we need to have explicitly state that if we were to go to, you know, have those kind of categories in there. But I don't think modeling is something we do after the project is over. We really should take advantage of what, you know, as part of the preemptive and to even future activities. And I'm happy to, okay, Katrin, you can add some more statements too if you want to.
Yeah, I made that comment because it wasn't kind of explicit, and I like very much what you say and absolutely agree that I think it should be part of everything. But I think if there's, you know, this little blurb of what falls under those 3 themes, maybe we can weave some language in there, you know, that includes modeling and links maybe modeling to those other studies directly. I just feel that would make it a more, yeah, cohesive package, I guess.
No, that's great. And I would just say, I think those are, you know, we were just putting that one set out, and I think that's important to put in there, and to note that anybody who makes comments, you may be recorded, but you won't be attributed in any type of minutes that are, you know, it'll be this suggestion came up, just to let you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, I completely agree. Katrin, I think that's the second basic research theme has, if you look at the language of like our existing 4.3.4 performance element, it's super broad, and it includes things like the feedbacks and that sort of thing that you really, I think, need to take a modeling approach to delve into. So we definitely agree that it should be integrated there, and we can strengthen that language too as we make recommendations for the new plan. Under synthesis as well, one of the things we have there is an intent to continue the types of discussions we've been facilitating for the last few years about how do you better connect the observational scientists with the folks doing the models to improve those predictive models. And then the other thing I'll point out is in the current plan, we have a different collaboration team that's called environmental intelligence. And under that one, there is a modeling subgroup that's specifically a forum for advancing conversations among the modeling community. And so the approach we've taken so far is to host joint crossover webinars where we get the marine ecosystems folks and the modelers together in the same conversation to look at exactly that. How do you increase communication coordination so that the folks developing the models have access to the best observational data to improve their models and to test the performance. And as well, the other aspect of environmental intelligence is, basic monitoring and things like Arctic observing systems. And so as Kathy and Jackie and I were talking about suggestions we might bring forward for the ARCUS group to consider is, does it make sense to have separate environmental intelligence teams or does it make sense to have within the marine ecosystems and the terrestrial and the atmosphere groups performance elements dedicated to that basic monitoring and observing, and then have that conversation so that the folks conducting long-term monitoring are also interfacing with the people doing the research and the synthesis within each system, and then use those cross-cutting opportunities to connect among systems. So it's another thought to bring forward, and I'd love to hear what folks in our team think about it.
And the only thing I would point out is that those were, we don't have to put modeling inside. I mean, although I agree that modeling should be part of all this, those three were just sub-theme examples. So it could be that there are 4 for which you would put performance in, and there'd be explicit modeling that would then relate back to the others. So there's a way how you cut that pie, and how the best way to make sure we get that crossover link, I think, is what we're shooting for. So don't take those 3 suggestions that we have as like the end all. So are there any other topics that you think that, I mean, you saw that there are, I know, for example, the physical oceanography, folks have built a sub-team because they wanted to have more directed physical oceanography involved in there. So, which is fine, but it would be nice to make sure we also have a cadre of physical oceanographers that want to cross-link within this team if it stays as is. I would just throw that out.
And I'm just putting this back up here. It was a suggestion from Catherine to go ahead and put this back on the screen for people to think about.
Yeah, and I guess on that note of, cutting the pie, I really liked the concept of making sure that we're formulating the next research plan to include the relevance to inform resource managers. Clearly I work for an agency that is a resource manager, as well as Alaska communities. And we're also looking for overlaps with some of the other teams. So I didn't know if anybody had any thoughts specifically on, perhaps not to call you out, Rachel, but do you have any thoughts specifically on good overlaps between Alaska community needs in terms of the marine ecosystem collaboration team or any other resource managers online?
Hey, Kathy, this is Rachel. And interestingly, as you were talking, I was actually starting to type a comment in the comment field. I attended, I usually actually attend regularly the coastal team meetings, right? Those are the ones that I usually attend, and periodically it's observing. And then only recently the data team. And I feel like a lot of the team, there's very little overlap with team members. I know that, I think that this, folks from this team probably attend more of the other meetings, like the coastal resilience team. But I feel like there were some of the issues that were overlapping. Specifically, I noticed that, the data team was dealing with a lot of, more, like policy-related things like, vessel traffic management and that sort of thing, which I feel like is an important, potential, issue, that, research from this team could be addressing. And so I think that, we need to think of some creative mechanism to foster that overlap. And then again, I also feel like one of the things missing from many of the teams, and I think that this speaks towards, why we're so focused on specific teams, is that there are so many, meetings going on in addition to just the ARPIC collaboration team meetings. I find I learned so much actually from attending these, and they're very helpful, and I share information, with those that can't make it, like today, several team members couldn't make it. But I feel like we need to think about how to, broaden that participation to include communities. And I know that Zoom is, increasingly proving to be a very difficult platform, to engage communities. And so I would, that would be one of the things that would be important to, I know that I've talked with Meredith about all the different kinds of ideas, and she's noted a lot of those, but I think that would be something to explore further.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And because I was on a previous of these listening calls, and I know there were plans to do a lot of the community visits to have these type of discussions. And then with COVID-19 coming along, that's kind of inhibited that. But we still have another, 4 or 5 months. So I think, so it's not without intent. So but we do have to figure out a way, because time will march on. And if we're not going up to the communities in Alaska, then we need to find a platform to engage them, especially when they don't have the internet capabilities. And so somehow we have to build that internal part to have feedback into this plan.
Yeah, Jackie, this is Candace. If I could respond to that just a little bit more as a member of the Plan Development Steering Group. And hi, Rachel, it's great to hear your voice. As Jackie just mentioned, as part of this engagement process, we had intended to hold a series of workshops in the communities this summer, and given the current pandemic, that's not possible. However, we have Meredith and Nikush actually working on some new ideas for how we can engage. And as I mentioned in my presentation as well, we have an engagement strategy team, and a huge portion of what that team focuses on is how we do a better job than we've done in the past of ensuring Indigenous voice is well represented in this new plan.
So I don't want to derail the conversation, or I'm not sure this is sort of the appropriate comment that you're looking for. What I said before, I like those 3 themes. I think we could, do some wordsmithing or whatever, add a word here or there. That's all fine. But so I guess I might be preaching to the choir here. But so under this first one, of course, that's of great interest to me. And personally, from a personal research sort of approach. And I don't know if, as I said, I'm not sure this is sort of the forum to discuss this or bring this up, but I think it's important to emphasize in the plan, or to the people that develop the plan finally, to emphasize the importance of those continued observations that it might not always be the most sexy science to keep going to the same places and look again and again. But at the same time, that's the only way we can really look at any kind of change and what is happening. At the same time, I think it would be important to sort of open our minds a little bit into those new technologies that are becoming more and more important, and we're talking quite a bit about eDNA, for example. And this is just one example. There's many other examples, and but in this case, eDNA would be something where we would go and maybe have another new tool to look at biodiversity. So who is there? But I think not only is this a tool that's currently still in development, but I think there's an importance to have a fairly good time period at which we would do both. We would go and do those more traditional observations we've done in the past, and do concurrently new observations such as eDNA or any kind of moored time series observations. And because otherwise, I think we're going to have a problem in matching data sets later on. What eDNA, for example, is telling us with what, I don't know, a zooplankton toe would tell us about what is actually there. And so to me, I think we're going into a phase of Arctic research where we're all aware that we need to expand our observations in time and space, and we, some of those methods might be, and new developments might be very, very appropriate. But if we don't ground truth what they find with what our previous information from years or decades of, Becky's grab samples or trout samples or zooplankton nets are telling us, then we might have a disconnect, and then we won't be able to do very good I guess, synthesis on any kind of change. So this might be too detailed here, but I think it's important to match any kind of new developments that are very, everybody and their uncle right now is about eDNA and everything. But unless we know what it actually means and how it compares to data, I think we're missing the boat if we don't do that well.
Now, Katrin, I think you make good points on that.
Question? Unless you want to
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is it Lee? Wait, go ahead.
I think Kathy was trying to say something, so you can go ahead and I can say after.
Okay, well, this might be a little bit off topic though, but I was wondering how this all fits in with research plans and monitoring recommendations that have been developed through the CAF expert groups. I know like Catherine and others have been involved in those. For instance, the State of the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Report. And in there we have made recommendations, identified data gaps and made recommendations for different countries' programs to coordinate among circumpolar countries and then help presumably influence their own national programs. So is there any mention of coordinating with some of these other plans, or how does this link up? There seems to be quite a lot of overlap, I guess.
Well, I think I'll just say, because I see some people on the line who are part of the CBMP or have been part of the activities. I think that's listed in the details under the current performance elements. And I know the Samba report is something that includes work that's been done in observing in various parts of the Pan-Arctic. So I think there's some of these are explicitly stated, and maybe they we need to make sure that we're not working in a vacuum. Obviously we're not. We have to work on the international, and that brings in, for example, the CBMP, the Goose and Global Ocean Observing System. Those statements bring in a larger context than just the U.S. And there should be some connectivity because we only have so much time and money.
And I'll just add on to Jackie's comment that we are currently in the process of developing a synthesis of the different strategy documents that have come out in the last about 5 years or so, ranging from like village level hazard mitigation plans to international documents. And if you have a strategy that you think would be useful for us to incorporate in that synthesis, you can send it to me and I will add it to the list. And you can see the current list on the link that I shared earlier to that plan development page.
Yeah, well, can you put that link again in the, I know it's in the talks, but in the chat box?
Yep.
Great.
So is the idea then to, throughout this, to cross-reference where there are overlaps?
Yeah, well, this is Kathy. Kathy, hi. I think that, I don't know what will come out in the final, 5-year plan, but I think it's very important for us to make those overlaps as clear as we can. I think oftentimes people that are engaged in some of the Pan-Arctic efforts know it very well. I mean, yourself online with the Seabird group and the CAF CBMP group. But I think the more that we can make those connections known is helpful for, you know, resource managers who are oftentimes deciding on which programs and long-term monitoring to fund. And I also think it's very important to engage our communities in the relevance of what's going on Pan-Arctic and how some of the work that we're doing within the US is giving us this broader perspective. You know, I think that's a real challenge to figure out where this would be documented within IARPC, whether it would be separate as what Meredith was just indicating, or if we should implicitly give examples of how, for example, you know, the DBO is clearly much broader context than the US and AMBON. And then also certain things with the LTERs and some of the longstanding ecosystem research that NOAA is doing, how that kind of gives us a broader perspective on the large marine ecosystems of the Arctic. So Jackie, do you have a perspective on, you know, I guess, you know, is it kind of a lumping or a splitting, or is it implicitly in our current performance elements?
I would honestly say I think it's smattered throughout some of the elements. In fact, I think some of the performance elements overlap. You know, when you talk about ice-related species, then automatically goes to upper trophics, and to me, because I'm a lower trophic person. So, you know, so I find another performance element like the one sitting right there on this page now. So I think it's important, we need to be combined and explicit on what factors would be important in each one of these performance elements, including examples, like you said, if there's international. But to me, that table that Meredith is putting together should be a living document. It should be on the ARCUS page. It could be a supplement to this plan. But I think things are going on now. I mean, we're going on to the version 2 of the Central Arctic Ocean Plan. You know, it's a international under the Arctic Council, ICES, Pisces, PAIM, all these acronyms. But that's a living document. So when it comes out, it's not static. It's being built upon to look at vulnerabilities, for example. So all the countries are looking, transportation, plastics, coastal communities, you know, HABs. So to me, anyway, I think we need to be, we do this 5-year plan, but somewhere there needs to be a living document that, for example, other plans that maybe we have a pointer in the current plan because we know for sure CBMB or whatever's going on, then people could go look at that and see the live activities that are going on. And to me, then you can leverage that back to any activity that you want to justify and help justify in the plan. Whatever stakeholder you are. The only thing I would say at this point too is that I think we need to make sure we look at the stakeholders that we want this plan to address, which performance elements, you know, be they coastal communities, be they research managers. So we need to be thinking about stakeholders as we go through this revision process. Is that to say something?
There's strength certainly in having these links to all these other efforts and initiatives. And maybe, like you said, is a pointer might just be numerical or you know, superimposed at the end of each bullet or something, so that you can know where to look it up and what it does link to without reading about it there in the plan, but having like an appendix.
That's right. I think that's the way, and that particular appendix would be something the ARCUS webpage has to, people would feed in to keep up, you know, so even the plan would point to it because we pick a couple examples that are long lived. Then if you want to go look at that, then you're going to realize there's actually more, and maybe have some type of categorical, you know, different types to which these plans fit in, and they can, and then have a cross link like we're doing here. We cross link the Arctic Science Ministerial. Well, they're in that table that's living cross linked to the performance elements, some of these international and national plans, because national plans, you know, come from the, depending on the scale of your question, vary within agencies as well as international. So I would just say Meredith put that up, but Yvette, she's put up a note here, agreeing back, now this is back on the modeling. And I think everybody can read her notes. Yvette, do you want to say anything more? Because I think you're still on the line. That you want to add?
You know, there is a long tradition that modeling has always been part of synthesis. And I have been pushed since that tradition started because synthesis is too late to have the modeling. First of all, a model is in constant development, and it should not be a synthesis of data that have been collected years before, but on the fly. So that's my comments. And the other comments is that if you have the synthesis, you lose a lot of the brainstorming that people have on the ship. And that is really what is missing. It's like we now, all the observationalists would look at all data sets and try to figure out what's going on. That would be very different that if you would go at sea and see the people and talk to the people who have collected the data. So synthesis is really late, and I would say that modeling should be part of the basic research, not a synthesis program.
Yeah, I think that reiterates some statements too that I think what Katrin was saying and others, that that bullet needs to be in all. If we were to look at these three and maybe add a fourth, keep synthesis as it is, and somehow we have to peg that there's modeling at the beginning. There's modeling that should go on in each three of those categories. And I think that's what you're trying to get at. And I think your statements that are in there will be valuable to incorporate.
Did Lee have something that she wanted to say?
She was, but where's she at?
Yeah, I'm not, I mean, it might be just too much details and distracting, but following on what Catherine said and a little bit of what Kathy in terms of monitoring efforts long-term and how we ensure to include new technologies while have to compare to, which is always a challenge. But also in the long term, more in the Pan-Arctic view, about standardization of methods, or is that coming into a play in the sense that if we want to be able to compare efforts that are done in other places, are there thoughts on core discussions with other groups on most, because otherwise, especially when it comes to genomics, it's, you know, there are a wide variety of approaches, and then it makes it very difficult to really make comparisons or so I was just wondering if, but that may be too much details at this stage for the framework.
Well, I think you're explicitly stating if you're going to do a Pan-Arctic evaluation, then you do need to have standard protocols or some agreement to do some basic measurements that you can cross-compare. I think that you, and I know because we're initiating in the Synoptic Arctic Survey, we're starting this in June, to have these breakout groups, to particularly the biological ones. Nobody's seen these emails yet, but they're coming. Of which we're going to, since we're all working from home anyway, most of us, to start looking, so that we have some standard measurements, like I know Mosaic and then Anson Legacy and DBO, there's some measurements, well, but they vary across country. People are saying they're doing similar things. So what we decided on that, we're going to try to get working groups to share those data and figure out how we're going to do, like we know, I'll just pick on the zooplankton folks. For DBI, I know there are 5 different nets and we're all saying we're measuring. We have to make sure it's the same net. For the benthic, it's not too hard. I use a simple old Van Veen grab. But there are multi-cores and others. So standardizing, at least knowing what people are doing when they say they did this measurement, and try to build up some standard measurements, because that's the only way we're going to do Pan-Arctic comparisons. And so I think that's what you're, and DNA and same genetics, genomics, that's going so fast. And even measurements of primary production, which we think that, you know, before I was born, they're done different ways. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's a very good point. And personally, I think we need to explicitly, we don't need to go into the details, but we explicitly say that this needs to be done. So somebody can.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Kathy had to get off. Anything else? I think we're coming to our end anyway. And Kathy, I'm going to let you close it up. But the only thing I would say, and Danielle, if you have any last comments, is that, you know, there's a lot of forums. There's one, like Meredith said, this Friday to add in. But I think there's also a survey and input. If you just feel like sitting down and putting some input on that, there's enough time till August before the 1st, and then there's going to be a draft and so forth on that. That this is the time to put some your ideas forward, no matter whether you think, oh, well, maybe they won't work or not. It's well worth putting them in, because if they're repetitive by many people, it'll rise up as an important one to go forward. So I just want to say personally, I'm going to shut up, to thank you very much for being on the call and your input. So I'm going to pass it over to Danielle and Kathy.
Okay. Yes, I want to reiterate, thank you all so much for taking the time to provide your input, and we look forward to seeing your comments come through these other channels we've informed you about. Just real quickly, we wanted to provide a quick update opportunity at the end of the call for people to provide updates that may be relevant, because next month we'll be having a crossover call. We won't have a dedicated marine ecosystems call. So if there are any announcements people want to make that might be relevant for our team in the next month or two, please go ahead and do so. We have lots of people watch these webinar recordings. So if you want to get your message out to a broader community, this is a great opportunity. So we'll just take a couple minutes for people who are still on the line if there's anything you want to share. Thank you.
Well, I would just only add that, sorry.
Sorry, Jackie. This is Candace with NOAA Fisheries. And I just wanted to let folks know, and I posted this on IARPC Collaborations yesterday, that on Friday afternoon, NOAA Fisheries announced that because of the uncertainties created by the current pandemic, that we have taken the unprecedented step to cancel 5 of 6 large-scale research surveys in federal waters off of Alaska for 2020. The canceled surveys include the Aleutian Islands Bottom Trawl Survey, the Eastern Bering Sea Bottom Trawl Survey, the Northern Bering Sea Bottom Trawl Survey, the Bering Sea Pollock Acoustic Survey, and the Fall Ecosystem Survey. However, the annual Alaska Longline Survey will take place as planned, and you can find more information either on IARPC Collaborations or on the Alaska Fisheries Science Center website.
Thanks for sharing.
I was just going to add on to that there's been a letter come out from COERIC too, and it came across, it's available to, you know, requesting that there are no research cruises stop in the ports of Alaska because of COVID-19. And I would just update that the Asian countries, Japan and Korea, that are planning their cruises, and China, they have no plans. They will not be stopping in on any of the Alaskan communities, and they're making the long 3 to 4 month runs to do work. They are going to be coming north, working out in Chukchi-Borderland Basin on the shelf, and then back to their home ports.
Well, great. Thanks for everybody's time today. If you have any further questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out to Jackie, Danielle, or myself, and we look forward to further engagement.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.